If you're looking to learn more about the BC brewing industry, we invite you to stick around. On today's show, we'll introduce you to Darren Hollett from Hearthstone Brewing. We'll go out to Town Hall and we'll do some food and beer pairing. As well, we have a Brewers Roundtable where I've assembled 3 great brewing minds together. And we'll also talk to Daryl Lamb from Legacy Liquor Store about the growing craft beer industry. This is BC Brew on Tap. Welcome to BC Brew on Tap on Show10 from Mahoney & Sons at Canada Place. We're talking beer, the BC beer scene. He's Darren Hollett. He's the brewery manager of Hearthstone Brewing. Full-time brewery manager, new dad. How's the dad thing going, first of all?
It's going awesome. I love being a dad yet. She's 4 months old now. Okay. Cutie. She's teething, so she's a little cranky, but we're super lucky with a good kid.
You got a beautiful daughter who I've met, and you got a great facility in North Vancouver.
Thank you.
And you guys are really killing it. It's been a good time to be at Hearthstone. So when was the evolution? When did Hearthstone kind of kick in, and when did it kind of all seem to be going in the right direction?
I mean, we've been brewing beer out of that facility for about nearly 3 years now, and it was going well at first. Like, and we were selling cans, we were selling kegs, but in October we opened our restaurant finally, and to actually have a home for people to come down, try our beer, and then also see the beer paired with the killer food that we have coming out. That definitely, the sales have kicked up for sure with that.
You guys have started down this path of doing some rather adventurous beers, as far as I can tell. The Graham Cracker was the starting. Was that the starting point for the?
It was one of the original beers, yeah, for sure. Yeah.
And I happened to run into a rep from your brewery not long ago. And he introduced me to, is it Mr. Fungi?
Yeah, Mr. Fungi.
Okay, Mr. Fungi. Yeah. Now, is that a mushroom beer?
It is. Yeah. So.
Okay. So I like mushrooms on food. Do I want mushrooms in a liquid? I don't know. You tell me.
So there is mushroom in the beer. So it's chaga. Chaga mushrooms. It's kind of a new agey, hippie, super antioxidant health food. So we use chaga in the beer. It's a rice lager, and so we color it with that. So we steep it for 6 hours, we simmer it, and it's not your typical mushroom flavor. So you get coffee, earthy, even chocolate-like flavors from chaga, and it's very, very subtle. So it's our rice lager, and it's colored with chaga. And so the whole reason why we did it, we wanted to make a black lager, but we wanted to do a different spin on it.
So we've had George Woods, your brewer, on the show before. How is the process of creating beers? How does it come about? Like, do you guys have like a weekly sit down and it's like you're starting throwing these crazy ideas at each other, and someone goes, "Yeah, let's do a fungi beer"? Where do beers come from?
In honesty, it's not as organized as that. It's typically we might be sitting at the bar. Yeah. With this one in particular, we had an instant coffee which had chaga mushrooms in it. We're like, hey, this taste is awesome. I think it'd go great in beer. So typically it'll just come random thoughts. We'll text each other, be like, hey, got a cool idea. We do have a board at Hearthstone where we'll just toss up different ideas, and a lot of them won't make it, but some of them will. So.
Is anything off limits?
No, I don't think anything's off limits. It definitely has to be complementary to the beer that you're going to be putting it into. Like, as much as we want to go crazy and try different new ideas, it still needs to be beer. And so you have some of these beers that are very extreme on the flavors. We like to go very subtle. So like we need to take a flavor profile and then patch it with a beer style, which we've done with a couple of the beers.
Okay, so you've got a cucumber beer as well.
Yes.
What is that?
So it's our Cool Hand Cuke. So it's a part of the same series as the Fungi. And so it's a golden sour, and then we dry hop with cucumbers. So it's a really light, refreshing cucumber taste, and then I'd say it's more tart than it is sour. And that's coming out for the summer as well. So we did it last summer, it went great. It's just really easy to drink. It's like cucumber water, but with beer.
What about when beers don't go great? What about when something just, for whatever reason, like car manufacturers have found they've rolled out a new model that just doesn't sell? Yeah. So if all of a sudden a beer just ain't cutting it, do Do you have to sadly say goodbye and cut it loose, or do you go, no, give it more time, like people will come around?
I mean, in terms of giving it more time, you can age beer sometimes, but typically if the beer isn't up to spec, it goes to the ground. It's sad to do, and it happens hopefully not very often, but if it does happen, your reputation is, you can't buy it back. So if a beer isn't up to spec with what we dreamed up for it to be, it goes down the drain.
What do you, if you could put on put a crystal ball in front of you right now and figure where this beer scene is headed, what do you see in the next year, 2 years, 5 years? Where does it go?
I mean, I think it's going to continue to grow in terms of BC. I don't think we're anywhere near our cap. So I think it's going to grow. I think IPAs and sours are going to be they're currently the most popular in the beer scene. So I think the sours are going to get better and better, and I think the IPAs are going to become different. We're going to see different types of IPAs.
When you say different, does that sort of use the word weird possibly in there as well, or do you think beer kind of has to stay down a relatively narrow path?
I don't think it needs to stay down a narrow path. I think, like, if you look over the past 10 years, like where beer was 10 years ago, now we've tried so many different things, and we have new yeast strains, we have new hops, completely new hops that some of them we're not even using yet, we don't know about, are going to come out this year. And yeah, so I'm excited to see what we got coming up.
I'm excited to see what you got come up as well. Congratulations. Nice to see you. Darren Hollett, the brewery manager from Hearthstone Brewing in North Vancouver. This is BC Brew on Tap on Shaw TV. Welcome back to BC Brew on Tap on Shaw TV. Now, each time we do an episode of the show, we like to take the cameras on the road to far and distant locations and show you just how adaptable beer is to pair with virtually any beer goes with any food. We're here at Town Hall in Maple Ridge on the Low Heat Highway. Andy Slynn is the executive chef of the Joseph Richard Group. Welcome to the show, sir.
Thanks, Joe.
Bo Porter is the bar leader from Town Hall here in Maple Ridge. And first of all, we want to talk about when you create dishes, Andy, does the possibility of pairing something with a beer even enter into your stream of conscience, or do you just kind of pair the food or just make the food as to your specifications?
Well, obviously we want to make it as addictive as possible, but in the markets that we're in, especially with craft beer being as popular as it is, it's always nice to have those flavors that make it neutral so that we can pair it with beers for sure.
A lot of restaurants in the Joseph Richard Group. Is there a single concept, or do you try and do different things in different places?
Yeah, right now it's actually pretty crazy. We're doing tons of different things. So we built our business on the pub brand, so we've got 14 pubs across BC and Alberta. But over the last year, we've also opened 2 restaurants. So S&L Steak and Lobster restaurant, one in Langley to start, and then we just opened in Abbotsford. So then there's also talk of an Asian restaurant coming down the pipe too. So lots of different avenues. So.
Okay, so for the starter, we're going to take dish one, and this looks pretty cool. What is this?
So this is our teriyaki chicken rice bowl. So you don't often think of going to the pub and getting a healthy rice dish, but this is one of them. So we have a tender chicken breast that we saute with some market vegetables, bell peppers, carrots, broccoli, some snap peas, saute with a little bit of teriyaki sauce on a bed of brown rice, pickled beets, and some scallions on top.
Okay, now Bo, you can jump in here because there's a lot of stuff in that dish. So how do you possibly think, hey, I got a beer that might work well with that?
So working with the Asian influence of the dish, I went with the farmhand saison from Driftwood Brewing in Victoria. The saison, typically very fruity, very spicy, and also coming into spring, the healthier options on a menu are obviously a go-to for quite a lot of people. The New Year, New Me resolution. But also with the beer, it works well in tying in the teriyaki and obviously the brown rice flavour, and also working well with the pickled beets in really influencing your taste buds.
There we have dish number one. So, Chef, for our second dish, you just can't go wrong with fish and chips.
No.
Now, what is the secret to making a good batter?
Well, the secret's obviously in the tempura. So you want to make sure you have a good beer, a nice self-rising flour, so it gives it that little bit of fluffiness on the inside, but you also want to have a nice crispy crunch on the outside too.
And what's the good kind of fish to use in fish and chips? Does it matter?
It doesn't matter. I mean, a light white fish is kind of neutral, something that you want, something that doesn't have too much flavor, nothing too oily. So we use fresh local cod. As our fish and chips.
Okay, so you've obviously got a little bit of slaw. You've got your own tartar sauce.
Tartar sauce, yeah. Yeah, we char a little lemon, so you get that nice citrus on top as well. Local cod on top of a bed of sea salted fries, so there's nothing beats that.
Now, Bo, one of our favorites on the show is Steel and Oak from New Westminster, and
Just about to mention.
I understand that kind of played a star in the dish.
It did. So we actually used the red pilsner in our batter today, and we do often use it from time to time throughout. Again, a typical pilsner. It's very European style beer. It works really well in cutting through the salt. in the dish, but also works really well with the creaminess of the tartar and also cutting through the tanginess of the coleslaw.
So if you're so inclined to be adventurous, you can really sort of go for a nice taste adventure. But basically, from my understanding, fish and chips, you can have that with virtually anything, any kind of liquid. It actually, fish and chips goes with everything.
Just about. I mean, fish and chips is a very neutral dish across the board. I mean, no matter where you go in the world, you can generally find it on a pub menu. And typically you'll find it paired with either a lager or a pilsner, or you can go as far as doing a pale ale.
And Chef, can you put your own spin on fish and chips, or fish and chips just fish and chips?
Well, I mean, yeah, it's got the basics. You're obviously going to want to have your tartar sauce. You're going to want to have your chips or your French fries. We put our own seasoning into the tartar sauce, so we have a bit of a secret that we include there that I can't obviously tell you. But
okay.
And then the batter. I mean, to Bo's point, you can use any sort of beer you want. You can use a lager, it makes it a little bit fresher and crisper, or you can go into a darker beer, a pale ale or a porter, and just gives it that extra flavor and that color.
That is a good looking dish number 2. And time for the dessert pairing of our food and beer pairing here at Town Hall on the Lougheed Highway in Maple Ridge. Chef, this totally takes me back to the Peony.
Absolutely. We're thinking about dishes for the pub. We want to make sure that they're addictive to people and they can come back for multiple times a week. So this is one of the ones that's kind of fun and playful. When I think of the Peony, I think of mini donuts, so that's what we have here today.
So how do you make a mini donut? I mean, we see the machine that loops them through at the Peony.
Yeah,
do you have
exactly.
something similar to that in the kitchens here?
No, we don't. It's a really simple batter that we take and we fry, and then we rebake them to order. We serve them with a berry compote, so a blueberry, blackberry, raspberry sort of compote, a citrus on glaze, which is basically like an orange custard sort of deal, and then chocolate sauce.
Okay, now Bo, we've got looks like a yummy beer from Parallel 49.
Yeah, so again, Parallel 49 is one of my personal favorites. Their seasonal milk stout is fantastic. Has a very chocolatey coffee note to it. Pairs really well with any dessert, any sweets. I personally like it because it has that the chocolate taste to it. We obviously have the chocolate sauce, but again works really well with the citrus flavors as well. Not too heavy, not too overload.
And this looks like a very shareable dish, I guess, for those special occasions?
Absolutely, yeah. It's one that is obviously a family favorite, given that we've got the peony tying in there. But again, you know, things like Valentine's Day, a special anniversary, fantastic idea.
The Joseph Richard Group has many different restaurants in the organization and more to come. So Chef, what do you look to do when you create items for food? Is it locally sourced? I mean, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, as much as we can be locally sourced is ideal. We have chicken is from the Fraser Valley, our pork is from Chilliwack, berries from Abbotsford, endive from Chilliwack. So as much locally sourced product as we can use is sort of where we go for. And then again, just making sure the dishes are approachable but also still balanced and healthy and stuff as well. So.
Locally sourced products, locally sourced beer.
Yeah, we try and keep it obviously supporting the local businesses around here. Craft beer is starting to take off in BC just about. And you know, we have to support, I think, local. They support us, we support them.
It's time to dig in. There's more BC Brew on Tap on Shaw TV coming up.
Host hair services for Joe Leary and BC Brew on Tap, provided by Bailey Murphy of Avant Garde Hair Studio in Yaletown at 1075 Mainland Street. For a list of services, call 604-688-1986 or online avantgardehair.com. Location services for BC Brew on Tap, provided by Mahoney & Sons at Canada Place. For a list of locations, visit mahoneyandSons.com.
So, Daryl, we kind of target 2010 as being kind of when the whole craft beer boom was starting to percolate, but you tell me that it kind of predates that, and you were there for it.
Yeah, I mean, 2010 is really where it kind of broke into the consciousness, but before that you had things like Camera and some of the smaller stores starting to put the craft beers on the shelf. It was getting more and more important. You know, for me, the kind of the watershed moment was when Ian walked through my door holding a bottle of Fat Tug from Victoria. He said, I got this new beer, why don't you give it a try? And I hadn't had anything like that. And before you knew it, I mean, that beer had kind of broken the dam. Before that, though, there were some really good craft beers that were available around. And I think in 2010, one of the biggest ones might have been the R&B Ice Holes. Remember when even Stephen Colbert was talking about BC craft beer? That really put it into the consciousness of the public.
But in those early days, for example, when you tried that Fat Tug, was it immediate? Because it's a bit of an acquired taste. It's pretty hoppy flavored beer. Was it immediate response, or was it a really slow trickle before people started to jump on board?
I think at first it was a slow trickle. I mean, the camera people, those of us that were drinking kind of British beers or Belgian beers, because there were always, you could go in the kind of the more specialized stores, you could find Belgian and UK beers, and we realized that there was this global beer culture out there that we just didn't have in Canada. And suddenly here was our own Canadian product that was different, and that's where it was the early adopters there. I mean, you had Russell before that, kind of pushing the cream ales. Ontario, you had Sleeman, you had Steam Whistle, Mill Street, all opening up in the early 2000s, but it was a slow trickle. 2010 though, damn bro.
So you mentioned Driftwood. Ian from Driftwood came in and gave you that Fat Tug, and again, I enjoy the taste of it, but it is kind of an acquired taste. It's rather hoppy flavored. What was the response? What was your immediate reaction to it, and did you think that you had something on your hands that people were going to buy into?
For me, it was a little bit of a shock, especially because I love British beers, and I've had like Wells IPA and things like that, and there was nothing like any IPA I had ever had before. So at first I was like, is this an IPA? What is this? And then he said, this is a Pacific Northwest IPA. Right. It's starting to grow in Portland, it's growing in Washington and stuff. And then we did a tasting, and I would say a bunch of people were like, whoa, what's this? And then a few hardcores were like, this is the flavor I've been missing my whole life. And it just kind of built from there. And then before you knew it, we were winning all these great awards. And really, I mean, it took people a while to get past that, what we thought beer should taste like, and then realize that no, beer is this magical product with a massive flavor palette, and there's something out there for everyone. And that Fat Tug, though, was the first kind of, at least for me, that first big hoppy, citrusy Pacific Northwest style beer. And from there, all other experimentation was allowed.
That kind of lit the fuse, if you will. Okay, at what point did, because I mean, back in the day, it was big corporate beer. Yeah. At what point, and the big corporate beer margins were like this, and craft was like that. At what point did things start to balance out? What was the turning point?
Well, I think the turning point was kind of the transition. I really believe, being that I don't come from this province, I come from a province where there's one place to buy beer and those big brands still dominate that. It really, I think the key moment for craft beer was privatization and the opening up of the private liquor channel. We had to differentiate ourselves from the government store. The government stores were tied up with big brand beer. So we went and found all these little guys. So 2010, when we opened up with over 800 beers. Wow. And we did that because we had to be different from everybody else. Now, of course, everyone stocks a big breadth of beer now, but in 2010, it wasn't really done. And so that's how we had to differentiate ourselves in the private retail channel to attract the younger customer, to attract the more experimental customer. We went and we went with the craft breweries. And I really believe that the craft beer industry and the privatization of liquor stores in British Columbia are tied at the hip. Same with VQA wine, moving away into like these more small batch idiosyncratic products. That needed the small store with the passionate beer nerd or wine geek or whiskey wonk, whatever you want to call them. You needed those guys in the store to hand sell.
Well, you have a huge selection here. How many beers do you stock? I mean, I would just say beer in general.
In beer in general, we're over 1,200.
Over 1,200. Beers. Okay. So, and we're still seeing breweries opening up. You're still getting
every day.
You're still getting newbies walking in the door, going, "Hi, Mr. Lamb. Welcome to ABC Brewing. Here's our IPA and our lager."
It happened yesterday.
Okay.
So there are more and more breweries opening up. Smaller nano breweries too, right? Don't forget, like a lot of these breweries, their entire year's production would be done at a big industrial beer factory in about 12 hours. So they're tiny, and they're coming in and they got single cans or 4-packs or growlers. I mean, it's really, the new beer model is actually the old beer model. Every town used to have a brewery and you drank your local beer. Well, now that's the system that's coming back. And stores, we had to adopt that because nobody's going to drive past 6 other stores to get to the same brand.
Now, I must ask you, because there's now such a great variety of BC craft beer, and you deal with a lot of, obviously, locals and visitors come to BC, they come into the store, they probably want to try something representative. Can you name like 1, 2, or 3 of BC's beers that are really killing it right now?
Right now, I mean, you got 33 Acres, you got 4 Winds, which is an absolute juggernaut. And the one that's kind of interesting that's come out of left field is Twin Sales.
Yes.
Twin Sales, mostly because they've gone super idiosyncratic. I mean, they had a mango passion fruit milkshake beer. They had a 0 IBU IPA, all kinds of weird stuff. And I mean, I don't know if they'll ever get to the point of being a massive brewery because they're so small and focused, but you know, that's all they want.
My final question is a loaded one, Daryl. You ready for this? We're in 2017. Where are we 5 years from now? What's the BC beer scene like 5 years from now?
I'll be honest, Joe. I think it's getting harder and harder for the breweries as more and more. I mean, in the old days, it used to be just all the guys hanging together, sharing beers and sharing recipes. It was us versus the big guys. Well, you know the old saying: the more animals around the pond, the meaner they get. And so I think we're starting to get to a point where there's a little bit of market saturation. I think it's going to be harder. I think you got to differentiate yourself. I really believe that some of the older breweries might start to fade away if they don't reinvent themselves. I think it's going to be a lot harder to just cobble together a few $1,000 and open up a nano and be successful with that because everybody's doing it. I think it's going to be a much harder business to get into.
We must time capsule this tape and pull it out 5 years from now.
Hopefully I'm wrong, and there's 500 breweries.
Thanks, Daryl. More BC Brew on Tap on Shaw TV coming up.
Host hair services for Joe Leary and BC Brew on Tap provided by Bailey Murphy of Avant-Garde Hair Studio in Yaletown at 1075 Mainland Street. For a list of services, call 604-688-1986 or online avantgardehair.com. Location services for BC Brew on Tap provided by Mahoney & Sons at Canada Place. For a list of locations, visit mahoneyandSons.com.
Welcome back to BC Brew on Tap on Shaw TV from Mahoney & Sons at Canada Place. I have assembled three of the smartest minds in beer. No kidding. I just found three guys. No, actually they are intelligent people. We're going to talk a little bit about the brewery scene and the BC brewing industry and where it's come from, where it's going. Paul Mulgrew, beer sales from Lighthouse Brewing in Victoria. David Brown from Bridge Brewing in North Vancouver. And Stephen Smiznik, who in your previous life were the founder and editor of the Growler magazine. So I'm going to start the questioning with you because now you're in a company called Factory Brewing. Mm-hmm. And you guys are brewing for other people. Tell me a little bit about that concept.
Well, there's a lot of breweries that have kind of reached their capacity and they can't grow unless they invest a lot of capital into that. So we're kind of there to help facilitate their growth without them having to put up any capital.
Now, if the case of Bridge, I was up to see your facility recently, and you guys still have a little bit of breathing room, like you can expand a little bit, but you're not that far away from being at max capacity. So does the factory model, is that going to factor in, do you think, to some of these breweries out here?
I think you'll definitely see that factoring into breweries out here, especially some of the smaller places that don't have that room to grow. We are lucky enough to be in kind of an industrial area where we do perhaps have some opportunity to continue to expand on our own property. But there's a lot of nano and artisanal breweries that creating enough of their core brand to satisfy their customers is holding them back from maybe creating some more fun beer. And I think being able to, a beer that is established, that's doing well for them to kind of take that off site and then kind of have a bit more fun. I think that's great for everyone.
And that's kind of the idea, is to allow these breweries to have fun at their facilities, at their home facilities. We do kind of the legwork, or we kind of do the drivers, take that out of their tanks, take the lagers, take the ales, make sure that these businesses can grow through their creativity, which is currently not available.
And Paul, you've come from big beer, and you're now working with Lighthouse, which is what is considered medium size by comparison. Okay, so you've seen how breweries can expand and how they can match capacity. When you see it from the other perspective now, like on the smaller scale, like where do you think the industry is today?
Well, I love what we were talking about just before we got on air. It was individuals, people that have always wanted to make their own beer. There's huge obstacles in overhead and equipment, and this is a nice shortcut to that. Doing promotional products. I know there's a contract term with what they're working on to start out, but I think it opens up a lot of people's dreams and imaginations and visions to sort of bring beer to them and bring their vision of what they think beer is and put their stamp on it. So you and I have been doing our own beer with Just Here for the Beer, and that's an interesting side too, is that would have been an easier project with a third party as well.
Well, so it's interesting that you bring that up, because the way that it's something we've been talking about internally is breweries need to build and then brew. We're trying to allow people to brew and then build their business, right? Do that first. Let's get that out of the way. And I think there's going to be more room for that, for sure.
So do you think, David, I'll point this one at you. Do you think that that will allow more people, even more brewers, to decide, let's do it because I can at least get my beer brewed without having that costly overhead of actually building a big facility?
I'd hope so. I like seeing more beer on the market whenever possible. I think that really at this stage in the game, if you're going to come in as a new brewery as well, like, you can't just come in having an IPA, a pale ale, a lager. There's a lot of competition. You have to have something that sets you apart. And a lot of marketing beer is looking at that, being like, okay, what beer are we making for the beer nerds? Why are people talking about us? But you can't just focus on that. You have to. A lot of love has to go to that core, because that's what's going to pay the bills. The majority of craft beer drinkers, I think, are still people that have moved in and they're happy now to drink a stout, they're happy to drink an IPA, but they're not going to drink a Brett barrel aged sour, this and that. They're not going to, like, I'm a beer nerd. I have that kind of like almost like Pokemon mentality. I have to try it all. Like I have, but not every. A lot of people they've moved into and that I think that's where still the core money's at. That's still what's paying the bills.
When you founded the Growler, what was the thought process at the time? And when you see how it's gone from being like that to like almost like the size of a small city phone book, are you surprised that this industry has blown up this big?
I never thought much about it, because when I started it, I didn't know enough about beer. That's the reason I started it, is because as a kind of new consumer, I saw a lot happening. There was no resource to try to grapple with what was where and who was opening what and when, and that was the thought process behind it. And now it's been a part of trying to explain that for people. And I guess I'm not surprised, because I never thought about it. I didn't know.
Have we seen the boom? Has it like kind of tapered off, or are we still seeing growth in the industry?
We're still seeing growth. I don't know. I think
it's more migration, is it not? Right, we're talking about $1 billion industry, and we're still a small percentage of it, and they're slowly coming our way, right?
Yeah.
But the majority is still on the other side of the fence, no?
It's a good question. I think that like radical growth has happened now, and now it's just a matter of kind of sustaining it, maintaining it, and inching towards what you're talking about, eating more pieces of that pie.
You're a relatively new player to the scene. As feet on the ground, when you're actually the person like, knocking on doors and shaking hands and kissing babies to try and get on tap, is that an easy process, or is it getting ever more complicated because there's so many others out there doing the same thing?
There is only going to be so many taps and so much shelf space. And like that's not really changing. And the same thing that there's only a certain amount of people that drink. We're not convincing people to drink, we're convincing you to come drink what we think is better beer. And I'm talking more from the big companies to craft. That's not like a shot at any other beer out there on the market. But so you kind of have to look at you do really have to look at what sets you apart. And I think the number one thing is the liquid. It is the product. So you have to have a good product, and then you have to market it well. And then you have to say, what can I do? I know from a sales perspective, it's like, what can I offer for you that maybe you're not being offered? Like, can I come down? Can I train your staff? Can I come down? Can I support an event? Can we do a beer pairing dinner? You can't just make a beer and put it out there and it's going to be purchased now. There's too much competition.
I think we have a hit on our hands here, guys. We should do a little spin-off series called the Brewers Roundtable, and what do you think?
I think it's great.
Good first effort. Stephen Smiznik from Factory Brewing, David Brown from Bridge Brewing, and Paul Mulgrew from Lighthouse Brewing. That's a wrap for BC Brew on Tap on Shaw TV from Mahoney & Sons at Canada Place. Remember, always plan a safe ride home, and please drink responsibly. We'll see you next time.
Clothing for Joe Leary and BC Brew on Tap supplied by Red Dragon Apparel, reddragonapparel.com. For BC Brew on Tap, this is Mike Schaefer.